Puddles and I are here in Colorado Springs again at the home of David Zuercher. Thanks, David, for having us in.
Pleasure.
You have a great studio.
Nice to meet you.
Yeah, likewise. David is a principal trumpet of the Colorado Springs Philharmonic, and you've been here for...
It's my 35th year.
Wow. And along the way, you had a very important lesson with Mr. Jacobs, and in our email exchanges, contacted you. You were someone referred you to me as a possible interview, and you said, "Well, I just had a lesson, but it was life changing." So whenever that phrase comes about, I'm always curious. So that's what drew me and Puddles to your doorstep. So thanks for having us here.
My pleasure.
So what was that? What can you give us some background, or what led you to that lesson? And
my lesson was in the mid-'90s and the early '90s. In my playing, I had noticed an air pocket developed on the upper right side when I would play. And I could still play. I didn't think much about it. I knew it wasn't right. It wasn't there all the time, but most of the time. So that, now looking back, that was the first crack in the dike. And then we had a difficult rehearsal with a Charles Ives piece where I was up high playing loud against the other third of the orchestra. We're playing 3 different pieces. And I felt something physical happened. It wasn't a great amount of pain, but I just knew it was not right. So I went and spoke with a Dr. Brass player friend, and kind of made me think about whether it was there in the past. I mean, was I getting alarmed over nothing? But something wasn't right. And subsequently realized that my face was in a constant state of inflammation. Well, if you play a lot on a holiday weekend or something, 2 or 3 shows a day or rehearsals, you're just a little puffy.
Yeah.
Well, I was constantly puffy. I didn't even realize it. So I took some time off, put ice packs, took anti-inflammatory, everything got fine. Started to play again. When I'd start to play, it'd just come back.
Yeah.
So obviously I was not doing something right. And so I went and tried to get help. Other teachers, and they were very kind, but looking back now, they really had no idea what was my personal situation. And our tuba player at the time, a good friend who had grown up in Chicago and taken from Arnold Jacobs, we'd talk a lot. And I was thinking about quitting. I mean, I can't play principal and be in this. Half the time I was using assistants because of endurance issues. Gotta go see Jake. Gotta go. Here's his phone number. Call him. So I grew up in Louisville, Kentucky. Went back to visit my folks. About a 6-hour drive. So I made an appointment. I read The Legacy of a Master and all these other books and reports, and so I thought I knew what he was talking about. That was my big question. Why isn't it working? And so I had a 2-hour lesson with him. About an hour and a half through it, things started to finally make sense. And so since then, I was very encouraged, and I started to practice. And every time I practiced, it was like 1 millimeter better. At least I was heading in the right direction. And my goal was to be able to play Bugler's Holiday again. And I was able to play Bugler's Holiday again. And about 2 years after that, had an opportunity and was asked to do the Brandenburg.
Oh my goodness.
With the Philharmonic.
Wow.
And I got half of the A's. But I think it went okay. I mean, I was not embarrassed at all. And to me, that is the top orchestral thing. I mean, if you can tackle that, you hopefully should be able to play anything. And I tried it. And so that was a testament to how far I'd come from almost having to quit.
So in that lesson, in that 2-hour lesson, do you recall anything, any specific things that helped you, that you noticed some progress, or made you sound a little bit better, or made you more relaxed or something?
He had all his charts. He had all the airflow toys that anybody that's looked into his method understands. And I'm basically a very simple person. Black and white.
Yeah.
And I thought, okay, I should be soaking all this in, because this must be really important. And I think it was more confusing to me.
Mm-hmm.
But looking back on it now, what he's trying to do to show me how this ball can go up in the air is that my air can work correctly. And I was not applying the type of airflow to get the ball to go up that I was with the trumpet.
So with the trumpet, you were using more air pressure than you needed, and so he was trying to get you to use more airflow.
Yes. Now I'm looking back. He said, if he would have said, you need to use more quantity of airflow, and he might have said that.
Mm-hmm.
But we're messing with all these toys, and so the fact was I was able to do it. I was not doing it. And the other thing that came up was, if you have something that you don't like how you're doing it, you need to create a new stimulus so you will respond. And I latched onto that, because there's a lot of my playing that is not working, and I realized my trumpet was a very strong stimulus, and I was responding incorrectly in many ways. And so when I heard that, I go, oh, so if I just change the stimulus, then I'll have a better chance.
You'll break through those habits, those patterns.
So that was very important to get from him.
That's great. The whole air pressure thing. It sounded like using a lot of air pressure and not a lot of flow. He probably latched onto that. Probably
Immediately
got on that pretty quickly.
Right.
And so getting you to use more airflow. Did he have you do anything without any of the gadgets? Do you remember any?
Tried, the first couple pages of Arbenz, half note, slur things, which are simple to play. And here I'm concerned about whether I'm going to sound good enough for him. And at that time, it would have been helpful to me if we had created a new stimulus for me to be able to use the airflow product that I was able to do with his airflow toys. Now you need to do this exactly with your playing. So let's try like lifting your leg up to create it. I think that would have helped. So I was sitting there trying to do it really responding to my instrument like I always did.
I see.
And so when I kind of put that together afterwards, then that was a big help.
Great, yeah. We were having some focus issues, so we thought we'd move over a little bit. And Puddles was out of the picture. He threw a foul fit, so we moved him a little bit. But so in that lesson, you had your aha, your light bulb moments.
Right.
What describe that?
Well, I'm trying to understand what this great master is telling me, and it's very impressive. And so he asked me, this was probably very wise of him to do this. I think he just figured I was awash in the sea. And he says, well, what do you think about all this? And I just looked at the floor and looked back at him. I go, this is really different. And he just slapped me on the knee. He goes, if it wasn't different, it'd be the same. So that gave me freedom to, okay, I can approach this radically differently. I have permission to do that.
Yeah. One of his sayings that I was talking to Rebecca about in the drive over was, he would often say, strangeness is your friend, sameness is your enemy.
That's exactly right.
So from that point in the lesson, how did things progress? Do you recall?
Well, I listened again to the whole lesson that I had recorded, and with my knowledge of the books and reports about him, I started to formulate in my mind what would work. For example, I was fortunate to work a couple times with Mr. Vacchiano in New York, and then my primary teacher's teacher at Curtis was Sam Krause. And so I'd go to New York and meet with Mr. Vacchiano, take a train to Philadelphia, and then fly back to Kentucky. And Vacchiano is a bull in a china shop. And Krause was more finesse French. And so you couldn't have two more competing type instruction. And so I just took those two and mixed them together and came up with my own thing. So I had done that previously. And so that gave me the permission. Okay, I'm taking what Jacobs had said, and I'm free to interpret it my way. And with him pointing me in the right direction, I was able to do that. But that's Krause said many people have asked him to write all this down. Where's the book? And he said, and Jacobs also said, it's very difficult to write this down because you can tell somebody something and you can try and make it clear to them, but they're going to interpret it their way, and you may do more damage if they don't fully understand what it is you're trying to say to them. So how can you write that down? For example, his book, Legacy of a Master. Well, I knew that thing backwards and forwards, and if you just read it, there's kind of a lot of conflicting information the way people interpret what Jacobs told them. So I can understand that. So it really takes one-on-one, somebody able to decipher what your problem is and give you pointed information. The way you can understand it, too. Has to speak your lingo.
Mm-hmm.
He did that, for sure, but I was having to sift through all this misinformation. And by listening to the recordings again...
Your lesson?
Yes.
Yeah.
My lesson with him on my way back to Kentucky. I was able to filter through a lot of the junk. And so he basically set my mind, screwed my head back on, and gave me permission to approach it differently. So that's probably the best thing I got from him.
And how would you describe the difference? What did you start doing differently? What was the...
Going for the sound. I mean, I was probably as good as anyone at playing defensively. I knew what the notes looked like. I knew what I thought it should feel like to play, depending on the range or the volume. And I was getting pretty good at playing those notes. But now I conceptualize the excerpt or the melody in my mind. And just like if you were singing, you'd have the book out and you're in front of the stage and you're going to sing a solo, and you just do it. Well, singers have to concentrate, or who knows what will come out. So now I would say I play more like a singer. Which brings up another thing. A friend of mine went to a Maurice Andre master class. And all the trumpet students asking me, who's your favorite trumpeter? Who do you like to listen to? I don't listen to trumpet players. I listen to singers. Mm-hmm. So, Cecilia Bartoli, Joan Sutherland, Kiri Takanawa. I mean, when I hear those singers, something just really clicks. And if I want to sound like them or sing, have my expression like I would be vocalizing the excerpt, I guess that's what I do, for better or worse. But it makes a lot of sense to me.
So you weren't conceptualizing before you went and saw Jacobs?
No.
Before we started rolling, you described an interesting situation when you were in school. You were given the horn, and this is a note, and this is the valve, and just use.
Right. Well, my beginning trumpet in beginning class, and they'd give me the instruction book, and second line G, play the G, it's open. So I burped out a C, which is the partial below, same fingering. No, that's too low. You need to tighten your lips and play the G. So I did that, and an ugly sounding G came out. Yes, that's the way to do it. So immediately I know what the note looked like, and I was remembering how it felt to play. What's the most important thing about playing a brass instrument? producing great sound. Well, I was remembering, I was storing on my hard drive what notes felt like to play and what they looked like. No concept of what playing a note the way I wanted it to sound.
And so when you came to Jacobs, that's when that first
Yes.
principle
He
started.
was very frustrated with me because it was apparent I had no clue. I was no offensive player. I wasn't conceptualizing and following through with the plan as an offensive football player. I was defensive. I was responding to whatever physical activity I was putting onto it.
So when he would say in the lesson, play it like Bud, that didn't resonate with you at that point.
At that point, no. Because Herseth, that's who I cut my teeth on, all his orchestral. So I knew that sound. But I had all this misinformation or lack of understanding that I couldn't immediately figure out what he was saying.
So when you had the horn in your hands, it was different than when you were maybe just listening to Bud
sure.
on the records.
I'm sure.
When you had the horn in your hands, you weren't trying to sound like Bud. You were trying to do it mechanically properly.
Very good, well said.
Oh.
That's absolutely right. If you sit down and listen, you can sing along with the part like you know the piece from memory. You put the horn in your hand, there's no way I could do that. Or certainly not as well as how I would be able to sing it note for note, even with all the inflections. But when I get the horn in my hand, the stimulus, I had created incorrect responses to that stimulus of the instrument being in my hand.
Yeah. So, Song and Wind, it won.
It's easy.
How about that? Well, David, Puddles would like me to present you with a genuine Tuba People TV water bottle for your hiking pleasure here in Colorado
It's going to sit on stage when I play.
Is it?
Yeah, that's what I need.
All the better. All right.
Thank you.
And thanks again for
Privilege.
letting us
I
come
hope
in
it helps.
Yeah, it does. Every story is really interesting, I think. So everybody has a unique piece of the Jacobs pedagogy pie.
Well, I was very fortunate to meet with him. And I've even encouraged other people before he passed away.
Mm-hmm.
And most people don't think they need that kind of instruction. So I must have been at a low enough point
Right.
where I really could soak it up.
That's great. And now back to you.